in many ways we have to be somewhat apologetic about, you know, returning phone calls and all, but in a way it's very good news, is we have just been overwhelmed, you know, with phone calls. She suggests that instead of charging illegal immigrants $5,000 in order to get legal status, have them do community service. Well, it may be something as an alternative, but I don't like to reward anybody for coming and getting in front of the line. I don't think there should be any federal laws at all regarding your intake. Under the Constitution, the state could do some regulation like they do with alcohol and children, but no, I do not think, especially that the federal government should override state laws that permit medicinal marijuana. I'm opposed to that. You know, this is a good question. It's a very practical question. How can our views of freedom build a coalition? But you know, I think it's a natural coalition. It's utterly amazing that the number of people who come and call us aren't the average Chamber of Commerce Republicans. You know, there are some Republicans that are the constitutional Republicans, and they believe in true conservatism and limited government. But we don't get the military-industrial complex, and we don't get the people who lobby for prescription drugs and these other things. But these views of liberty, if they're presented systematically, it's a natural coalition. You bring liberals who understand civil liberties and would understand something about the drug issue, but conservatives understand this as well. In foreign policy, a foreign policy of freedom and limited militarism should be available and should be you know, attractive to both conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats. And I just think it's I believe so strongly in the principles of liberty in the Constitution that you build natural coalitions, and we should never think and write off liberals or conservatives or libertarians or whichever group and say, well, they won't endorse us because we endorse the Constitution, we endorse liberty. It's really a winning strategy. My position on marriage and civil unions, basically I would like the government not to have any say about it whatsoever. If I had my personal preference, you wouldn't even need a license to get married. In that way, two individuals could, if they have a relationship, they can call it whatever they want, just so they don't impose it on people who don't want it imposed on them. You know, it should be voluntary, it can be contractual, it can be religious, and we shouldn't be so bogged down in what one state can do versus the other. Under the Constitution, the states can have marriage laws, and I just don't like the national government doing this. I voted against the marriage amendment, believing that the federal government should be involved in it. He's asking me about what's my opinion about central banks continuing to dump gold into the gold market, and he suggested just recently another 1,000 tons in the last 3 months, Spain, and even the country that used to be the strongest on the gold standard was Switzerland. They are now doing it. I think it's contrived. I think that all the central banks get together. I believe they believe it's in their interest to prop the dollar up because so many people are involved with dollars and hold so many dollars. And if they keep the price of gold down, it looks like the dollar's stronger than it really should be. And this is not new. Just think back in the 60s, when gold was $35 an ounce, we literally gave up hundreds and hundreds of ounces of gold at $35 an ounce, trying to prove, you know, that the dollar had not been depreciated. But eventually, by '71, there was no more gold that they could keep dumping. So today, it's a little more sophisticated. I think they interfere in the gold market to keep the price of gold down, as well as dumping it. The central banks do this. They must believe that they can maintain a a paper standard. But ironically, a lot of that gold is being bought up by those individuals who hold the gold. The Eastern nations, even China's buying gold at the same time. Our jobs are going over there, and the real money is going over there. But I think it's contrived to try to punish those individuals who think, who anticipate that the dollar will go down in value. Well, there's probably a lot of truth to this, that we will run out of oil, but I don't worry about it. If you have, the freer the market, the less you have to worry about it. The real tragedy is that there is always a thought that if you don't control your supplies, which is mercantilism and colonialism, and that's what we still maintain, because I'm quite sure we're in the Middle East because of oil, but as the oil supplies go down, if we peaked out and there's not going to be any new supplies, if you have the market and prices go up, consumers are going to adjust. There will be some alternatives. I think that we have to have the free market in order for alternative sources to come up, but I think electricity could run our automobiles as well. Okay, how would we abolish the Federal Reserve? I do not advocate closing the door in one day because it would be very chaotic. But what we need to do, which is what we can do in so many of our problems that we face, is just legalize freedom. Legalize competition. Legalize, make sure private schools and homeschool is always legal to compete with the government schools. And in money you want gold and silver to circulate as real money. It shouldn't be taxed. There should be no sales taxes and capital gains taxes, and you should settle disputes in gold. And that just is legalizing the Constitution. So you don't have to make more chaos, but you just have to allow people to opt out when they see the problems coming. They can save their money in a gold account rather than a paper account. You know, I have a lot of respect, obviously, for the Constitution, and that executive orders basically aren't legal. But I would think it would be perfectly legal for a different president to undo illegal presidential orders. That we should have strict regulation of guns on the guns that the government holds. Federal government bureaucrats who carry guns because they're enforcing laws that the American people are sick and tired of. So whether they're all these agencies of government, IRS agents and OSHA agents and EPA agents, Fish and Wildlife people, they all are carrying guns these days because they're a little bit worried that maybe the people are getting annoyed. But they shouldn't have guns at all. I mean, the gun issue, the Second Amendment is a very important issue. And the main reason they wanted the people to have guns was to be able to restrain the government if the government got out of control. So that is one of the legitimate functions that we have, and we do such a poor job. But the first thing is to stop the bleeding, get them out of harm's way, bring them home so we don't have so many wounded and sick and all of them coming back. But then we have to put the priority way up there. For the money we save by not policing the world, it should be doing the legitimate things, taking care of our veterans and protecting our borders. But what can we do about the NAFTA superhighway? Make sure it never gets funded. I think trade should be, the legal trade that I see is if you as an individual want to spend your money wherever, whenever, you should have the right to do that. The illegal stuff, obviously, you know, you should deal with it, but basically I would like to make sure that you get a chance to spend your money. It's your money, and you should be able to spend it the way you want. Well, when the government is small enough that we don't need much taxation, tariffs are taxes. And if you got a very small government, you might be able to support the government just with tariffs like we did in the early years. But if you have the conditions we have now and just raise tariffs, you're raising taxes and you're hurting the poor people who buy cheap goods, you know. So you don't want to just raise tariffs. But a proper sized government means that you would have very low taxes, you wouldn't have the income tax, and you would have maybe a tariff tax to pay for the government's operation. I don't buy into the argument that we just need more rules on people who lobby the government. Lobbying had gotten a bad name, but you can all be lobbyists and petitioners. You have an absolute right to petition the government, and that has to be protected. What is the problem is the government has our money and they control us and they control everything. So the auction is out there, and who's doing the auction? The people who are powerful, the military-industrial complex, the big drug companies, the HMOs and insurance companies. They have the influence. So you have to change the nature of government to really solve that problem completely. If he's convicted in a legitimate court of a war crimes, there should be no amnesty. What is the most important thing you can do other than supporting your candidate or a particular issue politically? I think it's education. I believe people have to be informed.
Learn it! Yeah.
And our obligation to ourselves is to be very, very well informed on all the issues. If you believe in freedom, you have to learn how freedom works so that when the do-gooders come up and say, well, if we don't have government telling you what you can smoke, drink, and eat, people are going to do bad things. You have to know how to answer that to persuade people. If people come up and say to you, well, you believe in the free enterprise system, but what are you going to do about the poor? You have to learn how to answer that. You have to be convinced yourself. In the same way, oh, you don't want to police the world. That means that you don't care about the people who are suffering in Africa. What are you going to do unless you force people to do that? You have to have answers. So it's education and conviction that freedom works. And freedom does work much better than authoritarianism. Throughout all of history, almost all governments have been authoritarian. It's been such a small test in the 6,000 years of human history where people have been allowed to run their own lives. And the best experiment has been here. And history is showing that there's a temptation by those who get power to use power and to expand their power. And that's what we're witnessing. And that's why we're all upset. But we have to say the experiment was great. The notion that the founders have that individuals can better run their lives is a workable system, so we need to know about it and how it works and persuade people. And believe me, if you know the answers to that, you will be used in your efforts. Somebody will come and they'll seek you out and they will give you a job. And the jobs are available because we're all communicating now on this internet system, which is bringing us together, and we're going to win this fight. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Give what you can to Ron Paul, help him out. He was able to cut out